Welcome everyone. We have a very special guest for you today, maybe a surprise guest. His name is Bryant McGill, and he joins us in studio in Austin to talk with us about, well, a number of fascinating things having to do with you and your future and your consciousness and so on. We'll get into all that. Thank you for joining me today. It's a real honor to have you here, Bryant.
It's such a pleasure to be here, Mike. I mean, truly, I'm just so happy to be here, to be able to share information and share my journey and learn a little bit about yours and all the great works that you do. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, it's, like I said, it's an honor to have you here. For many of our audience members, I'm sure, are very familiar with your work, but some aren't. So could you give them a little bit of background of who you are, what you're doing, why you're here?
Well, you know, I ask myself that question every night. What am I doing? I'll say that to Jenny, my wife. What are we doing? I mean, I really have no idea. Allegedly, I'm a writer. If you need a designation, that's what I do. I write. But really, it's just a matter of sharing, like everybody does, sharing their story, sharing their experiences. And of course, that happens in a lot of different ways, in conversations, in media interviews, in books, through our various social outreach and so forth. But fundamentally, I'm just a person trying to survive and thrive in what can sometimes be an ugly world, and share some of the little secrets and tricks that we learn along the way.
Well, you've inspired millions of people to improve their lives and work through the challenges that they're having. What I like about your message is there's not a magic wand.
No.
It's not like, oh, go in a room and just think positive and everything will turn out. Your message is very different. Share some of that with
I mean, I get accused all the time of, what type of motivational speaker are you? You know, this is depressing. I thought that I actually should be a demotivational speaker.
Or how about a dehypnosis speaker?
That's what it is.
You're
really
dehypnotizing people.
It's about waking people up. And I mean, really, it is true that, you know, what we share can be shocking to people at times. It can cause them to have a little micro existential crisis, to kind of realize that the world isn't exactly what we necessarily think it is, or, you know, we've all been kind of inculcated into various traditions through our upbringing and bought into a certain cultural and narrative and personal narrative, familial narrative. In many cases, those narratives aren't true. And so it's really about that discovery of like the caterpillar in Alice Wonderland, you know, who are you? Who am I? What am I? And what's going on? And what is my role as this little speck in such an inconceivably vast maw of eternity in this little time window?
I really like the way you explain that, because people run narratives in their own minds constantly. And these narratives are kind of stories or fairy tales that people tell themselves. And they're built on, you know, archetypes and nursery tales and things like that. But are they true?
Right.
And I think what you get people to do is to challenge those inner stories and rewrite them.
Yeah, challenge your own narrative. Like, is it true that your mother or your father didn't love you? Is it true that you had it so bad? Is it true? These narratives that we tell ourselves all the time, they become a kind of a reinforcing momentum in a life unexplored. They kind of wall us in. And so we do have to kind of stop and get off the conveyor belt every now and then, pinch ourselves and ask ourselves, you know, is it really true, this thing that I think about myself or that I think about my culture? Because this sort of pessimism and negativity, I see people tend to loop these negative messages in their mind over and over again. And I found it very empowering to replace what I put in that loop. Personally.
Right, because that loop, often it's engineered. It's engineered by society.
Yes.
Vectors of information, even let's say cosmetics, supermodel, advertising. It injects a message into your loop that you're not beautiful.
Oh, see?
Because it's skin deep.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Now you're getting to it, okay? Now this is from my book, Voice of Reason. I talk about how consumer research scientists and marketing PhDs, etc., they are trying to get into the black box of the human mind, which is a place that, thank heaven, so far they haven't been able to fully get into that place of free will. They've circumvented it to one degree or another, but they can't get all the way in there. And what they really want to do is...
Virtual reality is coming, though.
Oh, I know.
That's going to be the place of total control.
It's brilliantly scary, all of it.
Yes.
But they really want to plug you into a head end of created false needs. They want to make you hate yourself so they can sell you a solution to love yourself once again. And it is, in fact, very nefarious. And it's not a conspiracy. It's openly discussed. It's all a part of ownership, as they call it in the marketing world. They want to own segments from cradle to grave. They want to own you as an agent of buying or a beast of buying.
Well stated, and I think another example from the world of medicine now, in the marketing of antidepressant drugs, is teaching people that your brain chemistry is not complete until you add this chemical.
Yeah, what's the percentage of people on antidepressants? Just
I don't know,
ballpark.
30% of adults, let's say.
Right, so what is the implication of that? That 30% of people are born somehow wrong and inadequate and with some type of pathological problem? That sounds a little weird to me.
Yeah, it's a marketing gimmick. It's a big pharma fear-mongering.
Yeah.
It's just another example of what you're referring to. But now, when people get in and start to challenge these internal stories, though, that can be a scary thing for people to do. Because you've helped people do this, but also maybe people have complained to you about it. But it's scary for people to face their self-identity and realize they've been living a lie.
Well, that's all we do. That's all we do is hide from ourselves. And I'm guilty of the same thing. I can't even say I am fully me. I mean, I'm trying to get back to who I was as a child, what I was, that innocent boy, before the earthquake of life and all of those lies were dumped on top of me. It's almost like if you think about an earthquake taking place and people running to the rubble and trying to pull out the bodies. That's what I'm doing to myself. I'm trying to excavate myself from that. But it's a continual process. It's something you never really arrive at, because the truth is I'm fooled. And no matter how smart I think I am, no matter how much I research, the truth is that I have bought a certain degree of the lies. I don't know where the line of absolute truth exists within myself.
Right, even deeper, you don't even know if you can trust what you think is real.
Correct.
And like we're all living in a Truman Show.
Yeah.
Remember that movie with Jim Carrey?
It's a great movie.
It is. It's one of my favorite all-time movies because it's an awakening movie.
Yes.
And yet we're all living in a Truman Show. It's not a physical dome over us, but it's a mental dome. And when you poke the edge of that dome, what happens? They come at you.
It pokes back.
It does. And they say, how dare you explore that boundary?
Yeah, the system, if you want to call it that. And I'm not saying that all systems are bad. We need structure. You know, I love the idea of bohemian revolutions and free thought and free spirits and all of that. But we need structure in life. We need companies, corporations, cities. People need things to do. They need guidance. They need structure. So I'm not one of these people who says, tear it all down, but I want to know fundamentally, what is it? Is it a friend or foe? Is it friendly? Does it wish me harm? What is it freedom, or is it an invisible prison without bars? Is it truly free, or is it just a roomy cage with just enough room so the animal doesn't go wild? You know, I want to know where that border is and what it is, and ultimately, I do want to be free. I want to be free to be myself, and I think that, we reach about 1 billion people a year with information. We know what resonates with them. They want to be themselves. They want to be in touch with what their version of truth is. They want to be so-called authentic. Right. And it's not an uncommon quest. This quest is what life is for, to discover yourself, to discover yourself.
Yeah, well said. I might challenge you with this question,
but
I know you're okay with that. So your approach to this is, people consider it mostly very inspiring.
Yes.
And you really resonate with people's self-expression and higher self and so on. And in contrast to that, a lot of my work, even though I'm a long-term optimist, let's say a lot of my work exposes the negativity, exposes like the murder threats against vaccine critics and so on. And there's a dark side of society that we often cover and expose and so on. Some people they resonate more with the positive side, and other people are okay with seeing the darkness of society or the darkness of humanity. But that scares a lot of people too. It's like they don't want to go there and say, I'm human and these people are human and they're evil. Maybe they're evil too, you know. How do you navigate that for people?
How do I reconcile all of that?
Yeah.
Well, a quid pro quo on the honesty. I feel like we do have to, as leaders, while your work, like you said, is very different from mine, but yet not so dissimilar, because I talk about a lot of the same things. But at the same time, fundamentally, like you said, I have to maintain that sense of optimism and belief in the fundamental goodness of the human spirit, even the spirit of some so-called enemies, because I believe that much of the conflict in life is produced inside of us. It is produced by people who want to use a divide and conquer type of methodology. And even some of those producers themselves of this divide and conquer mentality may be a form of a production from something higher up the food chain. And so, kind of like Darth Vader, you know, he still had the goodness in him. I believe people fundamentally have the goodness inside of them. And I try to speak to that. I don't want to clobber them and just hit them over the head. And I don't want to be an agent of cynicism and pessimism. I want to flirt with and touch on the ideas. Let people do a little bit of thinking, but I do try to keep it fundamentally as positive as possible. You know.
Well, I would suggest to my listeners, if they're having a dark day and my website is too heavy, they can go visit you.
That's right.
And then if they're having a great day and they can handle another dose of what I do, they come back to my site.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like they coexist and they have different vectors of telling the truth.
Everyone's at different stages.
Yes.
Some people aren't ready for this. Some people have already gone through this. You know, I think we're all fundamentally working toward the same goal, which is, even with big organizations like the UN that I do work with, it doesn't matter if it's IBM or a country, there are factions. There are good people, there are bad people. There are extremists, there are moderates. There are good people everywhere. And there are people that you can appeal to the goodness in a person. No matter what stage and level they are, you can appeal to the goodness inside of them, whether that's through a hard-hitting dose of truth or whether it's flirting around the edges of something like that. It's all the same goal. It's freedom-seeking.
A lot of your work concerns the complexities of the human mind and the self-talk, the way we talk to ourselves. And one of the most fascinating things that I've seen over the last few years, and I'd like your comments on this, is we've seen sort of man-on-the-street videos where people like Mark Dice, let's say, go out and ask somebody on the street some question about maybe politics or history or the Federal Reserve or what have you, and ask them to explain what's going on. And their explanations make no sense, but they think to themselves that they are making sense. Truth is, they don't know anything about that subject, but they're filling in the gaps because I think they have the self-talk that says that they have to think that they know what they're talking about. The human mind's ability for self-deception is extraordinary. Do you think that this is a kind of thing that happens every day to everybody to some degree?
I do. I think it happens to everyone, including myself, on a regular basis. There are neuroscientific reasons for this. People don't have the capacity or capability to fact-check everything. And so over millions of years, we've learned to symbolically look at something, an institution, or a person and its associations and make a decision within ourselves of whether it's us or them. Is it us or them? Is it safe? And I think that really it comes down to ideas of safety. People want to believe that they're safe. They want to believe in their institutions. They need to believe in those things. They don't have the time to dig into. They're not in the news business. They're not journalists. They're not researchers. Even the researchers are compartmentalized. They don't even have time to research in a cross-disciplinary fashion. They have no idea. Even if they're a scientist in a particular field, they don't know anything about the other field. It's just information overload. And so I think people are retreating from it because it's too much. It's too much. There's no way to vet everything and everyone. And so that leaves a lot of room for assumptions, and it leaves a lot of room for people who want to take advantage of that lack of information to step in and fill in the blanks in ways that maybe are a little bit dubious.
Well, a great example of that is what I call the greatest cosmic fake news of all, which is the big lie that science says that you are not conscious. I think that's the biggest fake news lie in human history, but it is something that's believed by mainstream science, that you don't have consciousness. Actually, what they say is that the illusion of consciousness is an emergent property of complex neurology.
Sure, sure.
So they think that you are fooling yourself into thinking that you're aware, awake, and alive. And by doing that, they also discount the consciousness of all the animals, the elephants, the whales, the dogs. That they think the whole world is just zombie biological robots. What do you think about that? Yeah.
I mean, I know about the narrative. It starts with this kind of a Darwinian, almost a eugenic type of a birth of origin, that we're more or less machines. You could just imagine little gears turning in a person's head, that everything can be quantified and distilled down into some type of understanding that could therefore be reproduced. But I would just say that life is a phenomenon, and that people are a phenomenon. And you don't have to be a scientist to look in a lover's eye or get a hug from your grandmother and to sense something mystical and magical blowing in the trees and the static of the air outside. I mean, it's too much. The transmission is too large. No matter how deep we try to pry down into the fabric of what is and understand it, there's a fractal of infinity of more beyond even what we have found, in the way that as it is above, so it is below. It's a never-ending continuum. And I think it's extreme hubris to think that we can distill down what a person is into some sort of equation of true understanding. I think that transmission is so high resolution, and you don't need the proof. You can feel the proof. It's in your bones. It's in your body. It's in the quickening of the fire of your deepest sinews. It's just so much. And I would never be so arrogant to think that I could even understand one little part of what it means.
Yeah.
You know?
If you tear apart a grand piano and break it down to its pieces, you don't have a masterpiece composition from Bach, right? Or there was a scientist that's been putting out articles about all the chemicals that make up, let's say, an apple or an orange, and they would list all the chemicals, and it's like 50 chemicals. And their message is that this is nothing but chemicals. And I say, but if you take all those chemicals and throw them on a plate, you don't get an orange. Why is that? Because what nature puts into things, life, is more than the sum of its parts.
Oh, without a doubt. And there is, if you want to, you could use the word, there is a spirit to things. Or if you don't like that word, you're a scientist, you're a skeptic, you're an atheist, you're what have you. There's an energy to things. There's an electrical field to things. It's an electrical universe. These things are all communicating. It's well established. So I think that if you get lost in, the bottom line is everything is fighting words. Them's fighting words. Everybody wants to partition themselves off into a little group, and they want to fight each other and talk about how you're wrong, no, you're wrong, you're stupid, my way is the way, no, this is the way. There's a huge, vast continuum of commonality that we share as human beings, regardless of the nomenclature that we use or how we stitch things together. The truth is, I would say above and beyond even any knowing that we have, is that people just want to fight. And they've been raised to fight, they've been bred to fight, they fight their entire lives. And if they would just take and repurpose a little bit of that energy into getting along and into seeking common ground, I think we'd find out that actually we don't think so differently, that there is a lot of interdisciplinary study, there's a lot of integration thinking that could go on that really shows us that we're all the same human beings fundamentally.
I think what you just said is very important about how we're trained to fight. And getting back to that looping message concept that we touched on earlier, Even professional sports. What is it? Tribalism. You have a football team and they have a football team, and you're immediately an enemy of those people because you wear the same color shirt as this football team, even though you don't play football. And you couldn't catch a pass if your life depended on it, right? I'm saying you metaphorically.
No, I get it.
But tribalism is taught. And but on the flip side of this, what about what we sometimes call culturally the snowflakianism, where children are brought up to say, there should never be a winner or a loser. We shouldn't keep score. There's no competition. Isn't that the other extreme of the spectrum that maybe has gone too far as well? What do you think?
I believe it is, and I see it all too often. I think it's just all extremism is really not that great. Now, is extremism useful and purposeful at times? Sure. Getting a wake-up call, penetrating through those layers of unknowingness, it can be useful, but is it a good place to live and to stay? No. I think that personally, we should embrace our polarities. We should lean toward the polarities, but we should not fall into the polarities. We should find our way back to our center. But we should still be able to explore those polarities. We should still be able to look at the outside, the periphery. And I think that's what, the truth is a lot of work that you do, a lot of the work that, say, Alex Jones does, a lot of the work that any person who is talking about issues that are divisive is often discredited by the middle. But what I would like to say is that I think that it is very American, and it is a deeply important part, and always has been since the very beginning, of journalism, to have people out there on the periphery edge of that map where the dragons be, looking and turning over stones and trying to explore things, right or wrong, so that the middle can then chew on those ideas and understand something. Someone has to take that flashlight and go out into the dark areas. And I think it's sad that people are repudiated and so treated so viciously for doing that hard work, right or wrong, because it's a necessary explanation. It actually does a great service to some of the very centered journalistic organizations that love to beat up on those types of people, instead of just saying, hey, it's courageous work, it's heavy lifting. Someone, somewhere, certainly has to do it. It's always been a part of journalism in the past.
We've seen this trend over the last, I would say, 20 to 30 years, where there's more of a demand now for absolute conformity to the status quo. I actually think it's an emergent property of social media connectedness, where when I grew up and I was in school, and when you were in, let's say, grade school, there was no internet, there was no social media. It was okay if you had a different idea. You weren't comparing all your ideas with everybody in real time on your little mobile device. Thank goodness, right? We had the freedom to think, the freedom to be individuals. Today, because of this interconnectedness, people are smeared and attacked, even in a high school. If you don't go along with the crowd in the high school, then you are smeared and attacked by the other high school people. So kids are learning at a very young age to conform and be obedient to whatever insanity is accepted as true by the status quo.
Yeah, I've fought this my whole life. I actually get accused, I would say, and you could probably even accuse me of this yourself, of kind of being a fence sitter. And I guess I am in many ways. I haven't stopped on the journey at a particular rest stop. And I find that a lot of times when you stop at the rest stop, you end up maybe staying a little longer, and then maybe you might settle down and build a house there. And next thing you know, you're stuck. I like to keep moving. And I find that my relationships, I love diversity, and I love the idea of diverse relationships with full spectrum people across the spectrum. I have so many friends that one group of friends hates the other group of friends, and they would never sit down together, and I just don't understand why that is, because I thought that having an open mind was such an important thing, and it's something that I've always tried to live by. I don't understand why everything is so offensive to everyone. I'm not really offended at an idea. An idea can be right, an idea can be wrong. I'd like to be able to entertain ideas.
Yeah, you're like me, you have different circles of friends, and your ideas don't fit into a convenient box. You're not part of a tribe. You're not a Democrat. You're not a Republican on the political spectrum. You're someone who you have this neuroplasticity and this flexibility in your thinking, but it's always maturing. You're not going backwards in your thinking, and you're not unafraid to assert what you believe, but you are willing to explore more beyond what you understand now.
Yeah, I'm willing to believe I'm wrong about just about everything. I mean, one of my quotes says that most of, I'm just paraphrasing inappropriately here, but consider the possibility that most of what you say is just useless repetitions of noise and utter nonsense. And that applies to me especially.
I mean, we could do this whole interview just with monosyllabic, just blah, blah, blah. We could do that.
Yeah. I mean,
we should try it.
We should. I mean, it's just, I don't know is a great starting place for enlightenment.
Yeah. Let's shift gears for a second, because I want to talk about a very major personal transformation that you went through that's very inspiring to others. As you know, our audience, we're very much focused on natural health and prevention of disease and these kinds of things. You used to be obese.
Yeah.
Would that be a fair?
Oh, sick.
Okay.
Sick's a great way of saying, people like to talk about fat or obese, but sick is a great way of saying
you were sick. And what, describe that to the degree that you're comfortable for our audience, because it will be inspiring to others. And how did you work through that and transform your health? Because sitting here today, you look like a very vibrant, healthy, clear-headed person.
Well, I appreciate that, especially pushing 50. I do my best. But I found myself, that's why I question things so much. Because as a child, I was raised to believe that I would never suspect that corporations would try to hurt you, or that they would have some ill motive, and brands that you would see on packages, you would never think that they would put things in there that could be bad for you. I'd never even consider it. That'd be like crazy talk. And I started discovering, though, that over time that a lot of this stuff is not regulated, and companies in a way can subsidize their profits through your personal health losses. So the profit they put in the bank account ends up actually in a hospital's ledger somewhere that needs to be paid for by someone. So it's a very sneaky way of transferring money through the destruction of a being and its health.
You've nailed it. I just want to interject and make sure we fully explain that to people.
Yes.
You're talking about the externalization of costs associated with low quality ingredients or contaminated ingredients or processed ingredients that have a longer shelf life, more profit for the food company, but they cause a very costly health side effect in the consumer. So the heart disease, the cancer, the diabetes is being pushed to the consumer while the corporation makes the money. It's kind of like a manufacturer that makes something but they have toxic waste going out of pipeline. If they just throw that toxic waste into a river, they're externalizing those waste costs to the public as well. The food supply is a toxic waste dumping ground in many ways. So hope you don't mind me just clarifying that for our
No,
listeners.
I appreciate it. It's very true. And I didn't know. I didn't know. I just knew that I was sick. I mean, I weighed 100 pounds more than I weigh now. I had a 50-inch waist. I even brought my old pants that I used to wear.
Hold them up high.
Yeah. And, I could only, it was horrible. I couldn't even walk up a flight of stairs without having to stop in the middle to breathe. So it wasn't just about obesity, it was about my general condition being truly sick, not having energy. Of course, I had all of the symptoms that you could imagine. I had angina and gout and high blood pressure and prediabetes and all of these things. And I just started asking myself, how did I get here? It was a part of this wake up, if you want to call it, of trying to research. And believe it or not, you were a part of that wake up. And Alex and a lot of other people, as an independent researcher, I would look to alternative information because I had tried, the doctors wanted to put me on every pill known to man. And I said, gosh, there's got to be a better way for me to be able to survive without more dependency. I love the idea of independence as a human being. And so I didn't want more dependency. I wanted to be self-reliant. And I wanted to understand what the nature of my illness was. So not just being so-called fat, I wanted to understand the nature of my illness. How did I get here? And because I just knew from looking at pictures from the 50s, 20s, 30s, 40s that this was an unnatural state. And from looking at other cultures. You know, one thing about traveling is when you travel the world and you look at other cultures, you start to learn a lot about yourself through that juxtaposition. And I just knew it wasn't right. It was abnormal. There was something wrong. And so basically, I more or less started gathering information. So part of my reclamation was doing about a year or two of research, getting information and trying to put together a matrix of information from the far extreme, crazy, cuckoo land people to the center, to the people over here, mega kooks, everything in the middle, just what made sense to me, what made sense in my journey. And then I put together a plan for how I was going to not lose weight, but how I was going to live life again and not move toward decrepitude and stiffness and death, but how could I be vital and feel good again and have the energy to go out and do what my heart was longing to do.
So you approached your condition as not just an isolated medical issue. You dared to pull back the cover of, like, who am I and what brought me to this place in a holistic way, mind-body connection. And I got to say, I admire you for doing that. It's also a journey that I had as well, and that many people have gone through. But the medical establishment, you know, just wants to treat your symptom, give you a drug or 10 drugs, and separate your mind from your body, and don't even get into psychology and who you are and why you have this belief system. But to me, I've always seen that kind of just treating the symptoms as being sort of a cop-out, or maybe a lack of courage, or sometimes even a sense of self-hatred with certain things like chemotherapy, which is very destructive to the body. Does that ring true with you, or do you have a different take on that?
Well, I agree that systemic problems often have systemic solutions. And I did look at the totality of me. I was the one who was digging my grave with a spoon, as the old adage goes. And I knew that I had done this damage to myself out of ignorance. And so really it was an education process. And I did do it out of self-hatred, because a lot of, you know, that fat that I had on me was shame. I had cocooned myself into a place of safety, I guess, maybe looking for or hiding. And, you know, fundamentally, I had a self-realization as my message was starting to pick up energy in the world. I realized that I had an opportunity to serve my fellow man and woman. I had an opportunity to serve people by sharing my heart and soul with people, but that I was a hypocrite. You know, I was teaching people to, I was talking about nonviolence, yet treating myself with tremendous violence. I was talking about poverty and starvation, and yet I was eating more than my fair share. And I really realized that I was just a total hypocrite. And how would anyone take me seriously, or what my poetic heart's optimistic calling wanted to share, if I was so debilitated and didn't even know how to take care of my own self and had put myself in this terrible place? So I did look at it systemically. I looked at it holistically through a lens of holism, of many points of data. And I did not look for, say, an allopathic or a mono type of monoism-based type of thinking. I looked at as many points of data as I could and said, what can I change? Because obviously what I'm doing is not working. It's just killing me.
That's incredible insight that you invoked and that you just described. And it runs counter to one of the primary damaging narratives that we're taught in society today, which is that you should never look inside or turn inward for answers or wisdom or truth, that all those things are externalized. So a doctor, only a doctor can tell you whether you're healthy or not. Only your peers on social media can affirm your value in society. only someone else can demonstrate love to you. You can't have self-love because that's not a manly thing to do, especially some of the male archetypes here. This externalization of answers is extremely damaging, I believe. Of course, you also, if you go to the Tibetan monks and they're meditating, and they are, of course, looking inward, and they're finding great wisdom and value in doing that. So there are some parts of society that do teach that. But this externalization, I think, drains people of their souls. And it leaves you empty, even as you're maybe overfed with junk food, as you were, as I was at one time in my life as well. How do we help people learn to find the courage to look inward?
Well, I think you really have to, if you're in a state where you're feeling debilitated, you're feeling diseased, you're feeling low energy, you're sick, you know things aren't right, you have to ask yourself some fundamental and primal questions about what got you there. And I don't think that rushing to any particular side for the solution is the answer. I want to hear what a monk has to say as much as I want to hear what an allopathic doctor has to say. Western medicine's incredible. If I get in a car wreck and my arm's practically ripped off, I want to be sent to a doctor immediately. They're great at putting you back together, and our doctors are miracle workers, and bless them for that. But they're not very good at diagnosis, and they're not very good at chronic conditions. And a lot of doctors themselves and so-called health professionals are very sick and obese themselves. I remember one time I was meeting with a doctor friend of mine who was asking me for medical advice on how he could deal with his weight problem. And I'm like, I have no training in this. I said, but I can tell you what it started with. It started with connecting with what is true in life. Truth in community, truth in friendship, truth in food, truth in water. Just the very basic fundamentals we should learn as kindergartners. I actually took his prescription pad. I asked him for it, and I wrote on his prescription pad. I'm practicing medicine here. I wrote on his prescription pad to just start. Don't worry about it. If you want to go to whatever fast food joint you eat at all the time, I'm not going to tell you to just go eat broccoli or gnaw on a tree or something, but start tomorrow and just start with an apple. Literally, just have an apple tomorrow with your hamburger, after your hamburger, before your hamburger. And I wrote on there for him to have 2 apples a day and just start here and connect with truth. And I gave him his prescription on his prescription pad. And he acted as though I had just provided him, the next time I saw him, you wouldn't believe how much better I'm feeling after having that apple. You know,
That's great.
And I'm like, what is this? The Chauncey Gardner show or something? I mean, I'm just talking about basic fundamentals of just have a little bit of something that's true in your life.
Yeah, you're like, if the apple worked, well, Dr. McGill's got sunshine for you,
Yes.
fresh air,
Yes.
a walk in the park.
Yeah, I did very little to lose that weight other than changing my attitudes, changing my mental state, stress reduction, walking. Human beings are meant to walk. They're meant to move. It's a part of how we circulate our blood. Breathing, you know, your breath, it's very important. Water, hydration, sunlight. Getting yourself clear in many of these regards is just remarkable what it can do.
But people like to focus on just calories.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a calories issue.
Yeah.
And they turn to processed food. I think like the Weight Watchers brand has 100-calorie cookies or something. And people turn to processed food. They're not dealing with the person eating the food, which is them.
Right.
And that's where the problem is. It's not the calories. It's who's behind all that.
I think calories are a component of it.
Well, sure,
The law of
in the physical,
thermodynamics might insist that it's a component, but you can't just look at calories and just sit around counting calories, because there are all types of calories. And really the chemicals. I have to tell you, another thing that I did that had a tremendous impact on me was thinking about, believe it or not, soaps, shampoos, air fresheners, common household cleaners. I started realizing that I'd read an article somewhere that the average neighborhood has 10,000 molecules of these bizarre made-man petrochemicals in the air that you're breathing in. And I even remember someone died from some type of body spray or something, because they can affect the endocrine system so deeply. It can get into our blood. So one of the things I did was just cut out all unnecessary and bizarre man-made chemicals. And it had a tremendous impact immediately on my energy. It wasn't so pleasant at first, but later I could start to feel some of that life coming back into me. So getting some of the chemicals out was really important to me as well.
That's great to hear you say that. It can have a profound impact. I've spoken about this theory where your neurology is designed at birth to be sensitive and to reach out and to take in the subtleties of the world around you, all your senses. But when you assault your senses with the artificial fragrances and the chemicals and the salt and sugar overpowering taste and so on, I believe your neurology recedes like a turtle going back into its shell. And now you dull your senses and you dull your mind, you dull your brain. I literally think that people who wash their clothes in common laundry detergents dumb themselves down and inhibit their ability to learn and even experience the world. There are people, I have a very strong sense of smell, or very sensitive. And so, and perhaps you do too, and when we're eating and drinking, we're experiencing all these subtleties that are stimulating neurology. Someone who is dulled to all that because all they do is eat sugar and salt all day and they have all this fabric softener stuff, they literally cannot experience the same world that we are experiencing.
There is a such thing as a kind of a chemical overload that can occur. There are many different points of intake of chemicals, from us breathing to the detergents we use to the excitotoxins and unnatural things that are put inside of foods and all types of hydrogenated oils, etc. Fragrances, shampoos especially notoriously dangerous. And so I would say it's not so crazy, and I would like for people to consider that what we're saying here is it's not that one thing hurts you, it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. There is a point that you reach of no return where your system can just no longer process all of these deadly chemicals that are coming in, and it just can't handle it anymore. So it's not such a crazy idea, in my opinion. My own experience has proved that getting rid of those chemicals brought back my acuity, got rid of the fog that was in my mind, gave me the energy and the strength where I felt like I could go walk and do that walking and so forth. So I think there's something to it, at least in my own life I discovered.
It's fascinating that you experienced that. There's a tremendous amount of science that supports this. And if you think about it, agricultural chemicals, usually pesticides, herbicides, or fungicides, how do they work? Well, they are molecules that often, the mechanism of killing pests is to interfere with their neurological function to the point of death. That's how pesticides work. Not all of them have the same mechanism, but many of them are neurotoxins to insects. Well, these are molecules. The molecule doesn't know whether it's in an insect or in a human.
That's right. And some molecules can affect your physiology at 1 part per trillion. It's been demonstrated. And so one of the things that I would like to stress, I guess, in this moment, what I'm feeling, is to take chemicals seriously. Now I can imagine a skeptic saying, well, water, H2O is a chemical. Well, sure. Some chemicals are good for you and some chemicals are bad for you at certain amounts. And I would just like you to consider, like I didn't think, even household cleaners, I would think nothing of, say, getting Lysol on my hands. Or I remember I was helping a friend rebuild an engine and I was scrubbing on it with gasoline with my bare hands, not really considering that, wow, my skin is an organ. There is an absolute established scientific fact that what you put on your skin ends up in your bloodstream. It's pathologically measurable. And here I am as a child, where did that gas come from? What do they do at those refineries? How many hundreds of chemicals are in there? What's getting in my bloodstream? What is the implication of it? What is it doing to me? And if you just start looking a little bit suspiciously as a person who, you're the gatekeeper in your own life. You have a right and a responsibility to make good decisions for yourself. It's, it's based on basic cellular physiology.
Sure,
a cell has a cell wall, and it decides what it allows in and what it allows out. You get to make that decision too. And if you start thinking about the things you take for granted, the things that you will just so quickly get on your hands and not even think about it, and start asking, I wonder what this does to me. Is it safe?
Well, it's fascinating. The contradiction of the skeptics is so obvious. They say that, well, certain chemicals that are given to you prescribed by a doctor are so powerful and potent that they can treat disease. These chemicals have major metabolic effects and physiological effects. And then you say, well, what about these other chemicals that kill pests and so on? And they say, well, those have no effect whatsoever. They don't do anything. Well, if they didn't do anything, they wouldn't work as pesticides,
Sure.
would they?
Sure.
So the contradiction should be obvious to anyone who understands basic chemistry.
Yeah, molecules, they interact with your body. I mean, think about LSD. If you want to know if a molecule can do something to you, clearly it can do something to you. And I'm saying I don't believe we possess the wisdom or the understanding of what these chemicals do to us. They'll talk about a tomato in terms of its basic constituents like lycopene or vitamin C, etc. But they won't talk about the 10,000 unidentified phytochemicals that exist in the tomato.
Right.
And they think that they can just distill it down to its basic parts. But it's so full spectrum, it's so large, it's so much more than we can understand. And I just think that, isn't it smart to just err on the side of caution and just try to minimize as much exposure as you can to things that we're not fully aware of? Isn't that just good common sense?
What I find really fascinating about this conversation and you is that you have this uncanny ability to take yourself on these journeys and explore these areas that are very difficult for people to get into. And I know, of course, you've had mentors and you've learned from many other people, as we all have, but yet you have this kind of fearless ability to not just face yourself, but transform yourself, as we can see physically, and underneath that, there's a lot of spiritual transformation, I'm sure, that's taken place as well. So my question to you in wrapping this up, what's your number one message to people watching this? They're afraid, okay? Most of us are afraid to face ourselves. What can they do? What worked for you or others that you've taught to take that first step to facing yourself, even if it means you're crying in a mirror, whatever it takes? But what's the easiest way, or not the easiest way, what's the most effective way to get there?
You know, I get accused of being fearless a lot because my message is fearless, but I am full of fear, and fear is not something I've been able to eradicate out of my life. When I first started this journey and having some so-called success, which most worldly success is the opposite of success and delivers you into bondage, but when I started having some of this success, it was very frightening. I had mic fright. I couldn't even go on a radio show. I had the idea of speaking in front of people, much less 20 or 50 or 100,000 people like I do now, was out of the question. And I was just full of fear. My whole life has basically been a life full of fear, and still is to this day. I still have fear. But what I've done is I've made the decision that it is my life. And I look at it much like an amusement park ride, like a roller coaster. I'm already strapped in, and I'm on the ride. And the ride doesn't end. And it might be scary, but that scariness is also a part of the sensation of life. And I want to be in touch with me and what is truthful more than the fear. So I want something larger than the fear. And that thing that I want is called experience. It's called life. I want to touch, taste, and experience life. This is it. This is all I get. So it's compulsory. You know, showing up in life is a requirement. It's a requirement. I don't want to die without exploring things, without exploring myself. I want that more than the fear. You know, it's larger than the fear. That need is larger than the fear. So, like the moth to the flame, I just keep moving forward.
But maybe someone says, well, you're wired that way. Maybe that's just you. Maybe someone else doesn't have that neurology, that special neurology that you're invoking. Is that possible? Or is there something else that switched in you that someone else could switch in themselves as well?
Yes, I believe absolutely. It starts with just one change today. It doesn't matter what it is. And I've told this little part of a story before, that at one of my lowest points, I felt powerless. My relationship was horrible. My business was horrible. I felt horrible about myself. I hated myself. I said horrible things about myself. I was in a relationship where I was bullied. I didn't feel like I had any options. And I remember pulling up to a stop sign, and
like it screamed out, "Stop"?
yeah, I looked, I would always drive this one way. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to go this way today. And I didn't have any good reason for it, other than I needed some type of outlet of feeling like I had the power of choice of something.
I get that.
Just something that I can do. And so it doesn't matter where you are, what your station is, what your socioeconomic situation is, where you live, what you know, what you don't know, who you don't know. It doesn't matter. You have choices in your life right now that you can begin to exercise if you'll just dare to believe that such a thing is true. You see, and a lot of the systems and situations we find ourselves in are situations that are either intended or by some coincidence want you to feel powerless, want you to feel as though you have no choices.
Well, it's engineered that way in many cases, yes.
But you do have choices, and you can start don't go crazy, start one bite at a time. You know what, say I'm not going out with that friend who's negative tonight. I'm going to turn off the TV, I'm going to read something. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to do something extraordinarily different. It doesn't have to be an extraordinary action, but it can be extraordinarily different. It can be a deviation from what you do every day because you've been habituated into this certain lifestyle. So it just begins really with just one simple little choice at a time to just do something different and take your power back incrementally day by day.
I think in NLP, they call that a pattern interrupt. But you can do it to yourself. You can have a self-pattern interrupt. And I like how you explain how easy that is. You don't have to spend money. You can just turn right instead of left at a stop sign.
You'd be shocking what it can do, because in our minds, there's like a homeostasis in our minds. If you look at all your patterns and your habits in life, imagine your head as a goldfish bowl full of marbles.
Sometimes it is.
I know. I've lost some of mine. Some big ones and little ones, all these little things. If you were to reach into that and say, pull even a small one out of the center, everything in there will rearrange. And so it's amazing what small little changes can do in terms of affecting the totality of your life. It really just begins with making a decision to change just anything you can get your hands on with. The simplest little thing can lead to just enormous transitions.
Well, it's very powerful advice. I mean, you really hit something practical that people can start to play with. And for those who want to continue to follow your work, give us your website so people can find out what you're doing and learn more.
Absolutely. You can reach me and my wife, Jenny Young McGill, at BryantMcGill.com, GoMcGill.com, simple reminders. You can just Google us, and we're out there spreading any little piece of information we can find that we feel like could be helpful or is a part of our journey, whether it's right or wrong. We're just sharing our life with you because we want everyone to be able to be happy and have a good life.
Well, I'm very humbled that you were willing to come here and share that message. I think it's a very powerful message. I'm really impressed with the journey that you've gone through, and I'm honored to know you.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on the show. And like I said, your work, friends or not, it was a part of the tapestry of my understanding that helped me put together my own unique puzzle and solution for reclaiming my health. And I appreciate that very much.
Well, I know there are many things I can learn from you, and I hope to do that even more. Maybe we'll sit down and talk again, get into some other topics. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Yep.
All right.
Let's do it.
Thanks for joining us.
Yep.
Well, that's it, folks. The interview with Bryant McGill. Fascinating hour. And we'll do more, by the way. I know you're going to love this. I know the comments will be extremely positive for those of you who are, mature thinkers, advanced thinkers, and so on. This is not, Snapchat stuff. This is not for the, high school crowd, obviously. But if you want more of this, let me know. We'll invite Bryant McGill back for more conversations. We'll go even deeper than we did today. We just scratched the surface. So thank you for joining me. This is Mike Adams, the Health Ranger for naturalnews.com. Thank you for watching. If you want to support our mission, visit us at healthrangerstore.com for the world's largest selection of lab-verified superfood and nutritional products for healthy living. It's at healthrangerstore.com.